Rod returned to the Unremarkable, having collected the credits from the Kaza Zaibatsu for a job well done. He had a swagger in his step, emboldened by the influx of money and eager to continue their success. The last mission had been downright easy, and the victory had him feeling confident. Rod settled into his console and immediately made a transfer to the loan company that owned the deed to the Unremarkable. Paying off the debt on the ship took him and Nuk one step closer to owning the old rusted spacecraft outright. Rod let himself settle deep into his seat, daydreaming of not needing to work as hard to survive. "I am displaying happiness," Nuk announced as he walked into the room. Nuk came from a species that communicated with each other entirely telepathically, which meant they never evolved subtle body language cues like other races did. Facial expressions escaped them. Nuk adapted by announcing his mood and attitude before he spoke. Some people found it unsettling, but Rod always appreciated how there was no mystery with Nuk. If he said how he felt, he meant it. "Why's that?" Rod asked. Nuk placed the Klingfire pistol on the console. The weapon had been a gift from the Zaibatsu, but was broken. Nuk had spent a few hours tuning the weapon, and clearly had managed to fix it. "I am eager to use this to annihilate life forms," Nuk expressed. He wasn't capable of smiling, but Rod snorted at the outright joy he was sure Nuk was feeling. "Well, that means it's time to find work, then." Rod slapped the armrests and stood. "No rest for the wicked. Ask Rhea to see if she can find some work." "Isn't that a task better suited to Kasiwa?" "Yeah," Rod offered. He let his gaze shift to the other side of the bridge, where Kasiwa and Coralie continued to pore over data streams, looking for Coralie's quarry. "Seems Kasiwa's busy, though." Kasiwa and Coralie continued to scroll through records. Kasiwa sighed and leaned back, rubbing the bridge of her nose. They'd been at it for hours, and they'd found nothing. Coralie was doing the actual looking. Kasiwa was simply providing the infosphere connection for the search. Kasiwa let her frustration show, and she stood and began to pace. "You gotta tell me something. You seem so sure he's here. How? How do you know that?" Coralie paused for a moment, then continued to scroll. Without looking away from the screen, Coralie offered a morsel of information. "He was let out of prison but 4 weeks ago. He would have come through here." Kasiwa put her hands on her hips, sighed, and then pressed in between Coralie and the console. She changed the search parameters, narrowing the list of candidates down significantly, showing only recent travelers on restricted passage. Coralie looked up, energized by the now shortened list. Kasiwa only nodded. Obiadros was once again merrily strolling through the station, looking through the garbage. He'd found nothing remarkable to anyone else, but he was hopeful. As he continued to dig through a dumpster, he heard 2 ominous voices speaking. Their words caught his ears, and he listened intently. "Sydney came through here," one of the men said. Yeah, last week. He showed up on a prison convoy, said someone was looking for him, he was gonna wait here till things cooled off, then he'd head a few more Parsecs out. He'd be worth a lot of money to someone, to know he's here." Obiadros lit up. How fortunate! He knew Kasiwa liked to catch people for credits. Obiadros abandoned his search for garbage and scurried back to the ship. Obiadros ran back to the bridge of the Unremarkable. Just as he entered, Coralie had finally paused on a single record. A man's picture appeared, stoic, chiseled jaw. He was dressed in prison fatigues. Kasiwa leaned over Coralie's shoulder and read the name on the record. At the same time, as he burst into the room, Obiadros announced the same name of the man he'd heard would be worth money if he were caught. Sydney. In the hours since the discovery of Sydney's records, Coralie had pled with Rod to help track down Sydney. However, in that time, Rhea had returned from her job looking for work, and she had been given a mission from Webber Securities group. They had identified a suspicious development near where the Krorg ambush had killed one of their men, and they wanted the crew to investigate immediately. The job would pay handsomely, but Webber wasn't interested in waiting and needed the job to be done today. Rod had no choice but to accept their offer on the promise to Coralie that they would invest time into tracking down Sydney as soon as they had the credits in their pockets. For her part, Coralie was furious. She stamped her feet and stormed off the bridge, enraged that she'd paid credits to join a crew, only to have them turn their back on her when she needed them the most. The job data was accurate. The crew found an old service shed at the end of a dirt road. While dilapidated, the place was clearly tended to. Someone lived here. Old cargo crates, stolen from ISO Lambda, littered the site. Through the gloom, it was impossible to see inside the shed. With no targets in sight, Rod, Kasiwa, and Rhea advanced to take cover behind an old fallen log. Nuk separates from the crew, heading for an old crate. Animalistic mercenaries spill out of the shed, mouths lined with gnashing teeth, muscles ropey and twitchy and powerful. They advance through the gloom, one of them accompanied by a massive mutated rat that scurries aggressively along with its master. Obiadros, torn between staying with the majority of the crew and not leaving Nuk alone, chooses to follow Nuk out into the open. Nuk charges for the crate of credits. Obiadros follows. "Incoming! We can't fight them through this gloom," Rhea declares. She tucks in behind the log and uses her eye implant to help provide targeting information to Nuk. Nuk backs up and collects the crate. The animalistic mercenaries, like wild dogs, advance, their mouths snarling, their hands ready to tear their opponents to shreds. "They're flanking us," Rhea declares. Nuk levels his Klingfire pistol and depresses the trigger. A gout of superheated plasma spits from the barrel of the weapon. Rod dashes over to cover behind the broken-down barn and fires his beam pistol at one of the advancing mercenaries. The blast vaporizes him. What Obiadros has gained in using a rifle, he is lacking in aiming a rifle. He misses. Even Kasiwa is having trouble hitting her targets through the gloom. As she continues to scan the battlefield for targets, Ria's sensors detect a Webber Securities crate off to the side. She can reach it in time, but doing so would require her to abandon her companions in the heat of battle. She sends a quick message to Rod, and he agrees. The prize in the crate may be too valuable for them to ignore. Nuk's Klingfire pistol melts another mercenary. Rod discharges his beam pistol at one of the mercenaries. It is a glancing blow. Kasiwa continues to struggle to aim through the gloom. One of the mercenaries jukes through the sand, pivots, and lunges at Nuk. The two collide, tumbling in the sand from the impact. The mercenary's teeth gnash at Nuk's throat, but he remains stoic, expressionless. In the struggle, Nuk places the barrel of his Klingfire pistol against the mercenary's belly and fires. The mercenary turns to superheated sludge. Obiadros advances, aims, fires, and misses. Kasiwa abandons her cover in favor of a clear shot. She fires. Shrapnel tears through the mercenary's body, killing him. Once again successful, the crew surveys the battlefield for anything of value. They find a pair of military rifles, old wooden stocks stained from years of mistreatment and poor conditions in the dust. While workable, the crew resolves to sell the weapons for a tidy profit, adding to their coffers. The four mercenaries return to the Unremarkable. As they approach the landing bay doors of the ship, the crew spots Ria. She stands triumphantly at the top of the ramp, one hand on her hip, the other with a broad grenade launcher slung over her shoulder. She has a grin on her face. The weapon is clearly heavy, but Ria's genetically engineered musculature has no issue wielding the weapon. "You'll never guess what I found," she says to Rod. The captain smiles, as it never hurts to have a grenade launcher on the job. Rod and Kasiwa stepped past Ria, who for her part followed them onto the ship. As Nuk began to ascend the ramp, he felt Obiadros' hand on his shoulder. The priest, ever fascinated by technology, eyed Nuk's Klingfire pistol with a greedy glare. Without a moment's pause, Obiadros reached for Nuk's holster to take the weapon. For Obiadros, this was the way of all things. Objects had no owners, and possession was a fleeting thing, in the moment, temporal. It stood to reason that if he could grab the pistol, he could have the pistol. It was this attention to possession that had led Obiadros to delve deeply into the dumpsters here on Iso Lambda. But Nuk wasn't having it. He'd spent too many years in the Union military to let someone simply take his weapon. He swatted Obiadros' hand away, his face expressionless, as always. Obi's smile faded slightly as confusion set in. The backworld priest didn't understand that this was a slight to Nuk, so without a thought, he tried to grab the pistol again, this time more aggressively. "I only want to see it, Nuk," he said. "I am expressing frustration. Do not grab at my weapon or—" Obiadros' hand darted out for the weapon. Nuk turned his hip away reflexively, grabbed Obiadros by the wrist, and pulled the priest forward. The motion robbed Obiadros of his balance, and he lurched a step. The move was calculated, as Nuk intercepted that momentum with a rising knee. The priest's face smashed with full impact into Nuk's strike, his jaw breaking instantly on impact. Obiadros wailed, the sound muddled by the splay of blood that erupted from his mouth. Nuk released Obiadros' wrist with a twist, and Obiadros tumbled backwards, stumbling and rolling down the ramp to settle finally in the dust and dirt at the bottom. Obiadros clutched at his mouth, teeth loose, blood pouring from between his chubby fingers. "Or I will break your jaw," Nuk finished. Nuk's people didn't express themselves through facial expressions, but sometimes body language was their preferred method of communication. Later that night, two men stood backlit against an alleyway. Around them, people milled, most of them travelers on long layovers, looking for somewhere to eat, something to drink, or just a comfortable chair near a charging station. The men lit smokables, drew heavily, and waited, faces obfuscated by thick poisonous clouds that curled around their eyes. They'd been instructed to check in here, and they'd done so for hours. Their client was paying them well enough that they were willing to tolerate the discomfort of standing for so long. Ahead, they saw a figure approach, hat pulled down over his head, red glasses perched on his nose. The man in the hat was scanning the crowd, obviously and obliviously. Sighting the two smokers, the man approached. Without a word, he extended a small bag of credits. The two smokers immediately stepped forward, blocking others from seeing. "Not so out in the open, friend," one of them said. The man in the hat set his jaw, but did not draw the bag of credits back. "You think anyone around here cares if I hand you a bag of credits? Maybe I'm just buying something from you," he suggested. The two smokers shook him off. "There's no commerce on ESO Lambda. You ain't buying, and we ain't selling." One of the smokers drew a heavy pull, exhaled, and took the credits. The other put a data pad into the man with the hat's now empty hand. "Quite the little gang," the second smoker remarked, motioning to the data pad. "2 ex-soldiers, a bounty hunter, and an uplift?" "Soldiers," the man in the hat echoed, but the two smokers waved his concern off. No, not like that. Desk jockeys, not active duty. One of them's an alien, not a problem. Lots of public records on those two. Lots of nothing, really. The uplift, not so much." "I don't care about them," the man in the hat interrupted. "You're sure she's there? These aren't the types I'd expect her to associate with." They nodded, and one of the smokers smirked. "You were in for a long time, pal. People change. Maybe she decided to slum it a bit. Maybe she isn't as innocent as you think. She must have paid her way on board, 'cause that crew's run 2 jobs and she ain't been on either one. She hasn't left since they got on board, but it's only a matter of time, right? Ain't much to do on ESO. Cabin fever's gonna kick in soon, right?" "Or they're gonna leave," the other smoker offered. In unison, the two men exhaled plumes of toxic smoke from their mouths that wafted heavily in the air between them. The man in the hat nodded. He swiped his thumb up, awakening the datapad from its deep slumber. The wireframe image of an old scout ship started to slowly rotate on the screen, an unimpressive list of specifications blinking in and out on the core systems. The ship's name scrolled lazily across the bottom of the screen. The Unremarkable.